Good morning, everybody. Great to see you here so early this morning. And I'd like to issue a warm welcome to all of our virtual attendees or audience members. We've had a huge take-up online, as well as all of the great people who've come to be in the room last night and today, and it's really wonderful to have questions and discussion here in the room. But we would also encourage any of you out there who are maybe still in your warm beds or under your duvets, lucky you, to please contribute and engage with us. We'd be delighted to take your questions. We've been very lucky to build up quite an international and passionate audience for IMMA through a lot of our virtual programming over the last 2 or 3 years. And so we do know that people are coming in and tuning in from all over the world. We've had a sign up of over 200 people to this conference. So we're really, really thrilled to welcome you all and thank you for attending what I think and I hope is going to be a really exciting few days. Indeed, as Sophie said, we kicked off last night with 2 fantastic papers which sort of started to consider the idea of self-determination in relation to the aesthetics and culture in the period of the 20s. One looking very specifically at the Irish situation with Fergal McGarry's brilliant paper thinking about the Abbey and the role of theatre, but also popular theatre, an informal kind of activation and popular mobilisation of culture in relation to the Irish independence movement. And then on to the really wonderful talk of Adam Getachew, who kind of juxtaposed that idea against Pan-Africanism and Garveyism. And this was an incredible kind of thinking about not a sort of essential nationalism in a way, but rather a pan movement, a kind of a really interesting idea of what she called the spreading of blackness. So she was trying to think about a kind of a universality of blackness that sort of wasn't about suprematism, but rather about a comparative and a dialogue, which was really, really fascinating. So we were grateful, so grateful to kick off with such brilliant speakers yesterday. So no pressure today, anyone. But no, I know it's going to be a really fantastic day. I just want to also thank, of course, our supporters for this conference, and we could, of course, never have done it without the fantastic help and support of our parent department, the Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, Gaeltacht, Sport and Media, and specifically under the Decade of Centenaries programme 2012 to 2023, and also the support of the Irish Research Council. We've been very, very lucky to have fantastic researchers work with us and think with us, who will be part of the programming over the next few days. So I won't say too much more, but just to say and to explain that really this is a set of this conference is a sort of a continuation of a set of explorations by IMMA, and we really do think of it as a research conference, as a way to speculate ambitiously together to start to think about the Irish position in a way in relation to this term self-determination. It's not to say it's a sedimented term. In fact, I hope that we will even question the notion of these terms as we sort of dialogue through the next few days. But it came to me really and came to us to start thinking about this really when we were tasked, as many cultural institutions were, with thinking about the decade of commemoration. And, you know, it has been a long and very interesting sort of period right from 2012, where we've been really trying to carefully piece our way through an extraordinary history and a complicated one that has seen many changes, and also, of course, a painful one in relation to the period of war, civil war, and the War of Independence, you know, in relation to those ideas of trauma and violence. So it's very important and incredible that we work together on thinking about these often very overdetermined histories and how they relate to how we understand the world today. And I think for our role in that, we did want to think about this particular period of 21 to 23 and kind of the rhetorics of how culture was kind of enacted, but also perhaps, you know, belatedly understood as we come back to looking at that period. And that term self-determination seemed to come out to me a lot as one that seemed very, again, sedimented and established, but maybe only in our particular sphere. And that's what's been very, very interesting. And we're so grateful to have so many international kind of collaborators on this project, because I wanted to, I was reading a lot and just trying to think about what this meant when I came first back to take up this job and wanted to explore a project around the commemoration. And I was struck by, an oft quoted a text, or in fact it was a memo by Arthur Griffith, which he wrote in January 23, 2019, and he sent it to from Gloucester Prison, so right in the heart of the struggle, if you like. It was a memo to Dáil Éireann. And it was the memo in which he famously quoted or said, mobilise the poets. So he was trying to think about how to sort of galvanise activity, to create sort of advocates and allies to push for the sort of independence, and to push, specifically he's thinking here of Woodrow Wilson in relation to this idea of the right of small nations to self-determine. And what's so fascinating about it is not only that romance of that the poets can be the advocates. I think, a very beautiful and interesting idea. He says, mobilise the poets, let them address Wilson, let them remind him in their best verse that he has the opportunity and the duty of giving the world true peace and freedom. So, classic kind of political rhetoric in that way. But what I was also fascinated by in what is, I think, rather dry document is the way in which Griffith is thinking about who to talk to. And he's talking and thinking very internationally, very globally at a particular moment. And that for me became a real point of interest. What was in the imagination of Ireland at that time as international allies and colleagues? And so he's actually suggesting that they target the peace conference. He's naming South American states like Nicaragua, Guatemala and Venezuela. He's evocating his colleagues to go and talk to Italy, Germany, Belgium, Austria. Of course, this is just after the First World War. It's when we've started to think about this, it's really this moment of moments after the huge catastrophe that was the First World War. But before we segue into, the second, and obviously this whole struggle against fascism and the second tragedy, it was a moment of the collapse of empire, of the Ottoman Empire. Of course, the whole Soviet Empire is emerging. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire also disintegrating. So huge change, new nations are emerging, these rhetorics are shared, these efforts are discussed. And it was to that point that we wanted to start imagining the Irish context and Irish cultural context, the aesthetics of self-determination, the aesthetics of the independent movements, and what people were doing, as well as the poets and the writers. How do we understand these things aesthetically? It was super exciting to hear Adam Getachew talk about that yesterday in relation to popular poetry in the sort of Harlem Renaissance movement and in the Garveyite movement, but also the importance of ritual and sort of the aesthetics of the crowd. So these were just great thoughts that we might bring with us as we move on. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our fantastic speakers today, but I really do want to thank all of the wonderful staff of IMMA who've worked so hard on bringing this conference together, and also all of our wonderful researchers who have come from far and wide to join us today. Thank you very much.